Hello, mighty companion. This is Earl Purdy, and I'm here to do a Course in Miracles lesson 338. I am, I am affected only by my thoughts. Oh, I am affected only by my thoughts. You are affected only by your thoughts. That you know that you are affected only by your thoughts. It needs but this to let salvation, which is healing, come to all the world. For in this single thought that you are affected only by your thoughts, is everyone released at last from fear. Now have you learned that no one frightens you? Now you have learned nothing can endanger you. Nothing can endanger you. You have no enemies. You have no enemies. You are safe from all external things. You are safe from all external things. Your thoughts can frighten you. Your thoughts can frighten you. But since these thoughts belong to you alone, you have the power to change the thoughts that frighten you. You have the power to change the thoughts that frighten you. You have the power to exchange each fearful thought for a happy thought of love. Exchange each fear thought for a happy thought of love. You crucified yourself. You crucified yourself. Yet God has planned that you, God's beloved child, be redeemed. That means healed. Your plan is sure, my Father, only yours. All other plans but God's plan will fail. And you will have thoughts that will frighten you until you learn that you have given. You will have thoughts that frighten you until you learn that God has given you the only thought that leads you to salvation. God has given you the only thoughts that lead you to happiness. God has given you the only thoughts that lead you to happiness. Your thoughts alone will fail. Your thoughts alone without the truth and God will lead you nowhere. But the thought God gave you, promises to lead you home. And the thought God gave you called the Holy Spirit. The thought God gave you promises to lead you home. Because the thought God gave you holds God's promise to you. The thought God gave you holds God's promise to you. You are affected only by your thoughts. 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 You are affected. You are affected. You are affected only by your thoughts. Only by your thoughts. You are affected only by your thoughts. You are affected only by your thoughts. You are affected only by your thoughts. I am affected only by my thoughts. I am affected only by my thoughts. Mighty companion, this is Earl Purdy. Check out my classes on audio and video at www.earlpurdy.com, www.earlpurdy.com, and let peace extend from my mind and my heart to yours. Yeah. Hello, mighty companions. This is Earl Purdy, and we're going to do the theme 12 in the workbook, which is called, What is the Ego? What is the ego means what is fear? What is separation? What is separation thought? What is the ego? The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and a separated self. The ego is the part of you that thinks it's born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. The ego is the so-called will that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. Do you know the ego is the so-called proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, that life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true? Do you know the ego is insane? The part of the mind that thinks it's separate, the part of the mind that thinks it's separate from God is insane. In fear, the ego stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. Do you know that in the ego's insanity, the ego thinks it has become a victor over God himself? And in the ego's terrible autonomy, the ego sees the will of God. The ego sees the will of God has been destroyed. To the fearful man, the will of God that you be perfectly happy has been destroyed. Do you know that the ego dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder the ego before the ego can ensure the ego's safety by attacking them? Do you know the Son of God is egoless? Do you know that you are egoless? Do you know that your real self doesn't have any fear or sense of separation? What can the child of God know of madness? What can the child of God know of the death of God when the child of God abides in God? What can the child of God who knows he or she is a child of God? What can the child of God know of sorrow? What can the child of God know of suffering? When the child of God lives in eternal joy, how could the child of God know suffering? What can the child of God know of fear and punishment, of sin and guilt, of hatred and attack, when all there is surrounding the child of God is everlasting peace? When all there is surrounding the child of God is everlasting peace, forever conflict-free and undisturbed, in deepest silence and tranquility. Do you know to know reality, to know the truth, to know love is not to see the ego and not to see the ego's thoughts, is to know reality in love. To know reality is not to see the ego and the ego's thoughts, the ego's works, the ego's acts, the ego's laws, and the ego's beliefs. To know reality is not to know the ego's fearful dreams, the ego's hopes, the ego's plans for salvation, and the cost belief in the ego entails. Do you know that in suffering, the price for faith in the ego is so immense that crucifixion of you, the child of God, is offered daily at the ego's darkened, ignorant shrine? And blood must flow before the altar where the ego's sickly followers prepare to die. And yet, with one lily of forgiveness, will one lily of correct perception change the darkness into light, the altar to illusions to the shrine of life itself, and peace will be restored forever to the holy minds that which God created as his son. Peace will be restored forever to the holy minds which God created as his son, his dwelling place, his joy, God's love, and completely God's, completely one with God. So what is the ego? What is a fearful thought? What is the ego?